Helping HR managers win the war on talent with Army veteran Ryan Kellogg. Coming up next on Veteran on the Move.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
The top 7 paths to freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranonthemove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. Ryan Kellogg is an entrepreneur, Army veteran, and the founder and host of Win the Talent War podcast. After serving 2 tours in Iraq as a combat platoon leader, Ryan held leadership positions in the financial and medical industries. His latest venture, VIPO, focuses on helping organizations vet candidates to best identify top talent. All right, Ryan Kellogg, welcome to Veteran on the Move. Thanks for being here. We're looking forward to hearing your entrepreneurship story. Before we get started, take us back and tell us what you did in the Army.
Joe, thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast today. I am super excited to speak to you and your audience. So as we were talking about when we first got on a little bit earlier, I was a college grad from Providence College, did ROTC at PC, had a great time, go Friars, and took a commission into the Army as a second lieutenant. And during that time, I decided, you know what, I was going to go into the Army. I was a field artillery officer. And as a field artillery officer, I was actually stationed in Germany and at times in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So from about 2002 to 2006, I was either deployed or traveling Europe in Iraq. I like to say, or rather traveling all over Europe while deployed there. I like to say it was the definition of work hard, play hard, which was a great experience. But during that period of time, I realized, you know what? I had spent 29 months deployed in Iraq. It was quite an experience. It changed me and who I was at that point as a professional and as a leader. But I decided, it was time for me to stop rolling the dice and get back to my family, my friends in the U.S. And at that point, in about midway through 2007, I decided it was time for me to transition out of the military and start to focus on my future career back stateside.
All right. Well, I spent 14 months in Iraq around the same time frame as yourself, so I certainly understand where you're coming from. You mentioned Providence College. I think we know somebody else that went to Providence College.
Yes, actually, funny you mentioned that. My college roommate was no other than fellow podcaster JLD John Lee Dumas, the host of the Win the Talent War, the host of EOFire.com. So, shout out to John. John and I were actually college roommates. We stayed in the same room, had a bunch of great experiences together, and he actually motivated me to become the entrepreneur that I am today. And through our relationship, I'd like to credit him for a lot of my success so far.
No kid, that's hard. I can't believe you were roommates with John Lee Dumas. That's crazy. He was. I stumbled across him when he was real early in his podcast. He's probably maybe 6 months into it, and actually I hired him as my coach to start this podcast almost 3 years ago. So I probably would not be where I'm at right now in this podcast, or it might have never even launched if it wasn't for his coaching and podcasting expertise. And I'm sitting here talking on the Heil PR40 with the PreSonus mixer, the whole JLD setup. So still running the same EOFire template.
Well, that's awesome. He often says, "You're the only one who knows the real JLD," and I always tell him I could probably start a podcast about stories that you don't want me to tell anyone, and I'd be super successful because of it. So I always have that over his head.
Yeah, you bet. That's awesome. All right, so walk us through your transition out of the Army and what you were thinking and what did you end up doing and what were you looking for?
So, by nature, I guess I am a conservative person. I have, a very traditional background. And leaving the Army, I thought to myself, what is it that I want to do professionally? And I always had in mind that I needed to immediately get out and find a solid job. And that job would be something I would have for the next 20, 30 years. And I would retire with a pension one day and live happily ever after with a wife, kids, the dog, the white picket fence, etc.
The great American dream.
Exactly. I was fortunate enough to grow up with that. And I thought, you know what, if I can replicate that, that would be my definition of success. And transitioning out, particularly from a foreign country, was much harder than I had envisioned. You're always told in the military, the world is your oyster. You can write whatever chapter of your career, right off the bat. And I struggled, and I'm not afraid to admit that. For about the first year and a half to 2 years, I was a bit lost in where that career was, where I wanted to take it. I got out. I immediately leaned on the experience of my fellow friars at Providence. A lot of them had moved up to Boston, and I thought, I've got to do that. And I went up to Boston, and I decided to follow in their footsteps. And I got a job in a financial company. And if you remember back in 2008, October 2008 was my start date, and the end of that month was the recession. And I went from one frying pan to the next, and I was a bit overwhelmed. I was questioning myself, wondering what did I get myself into? And I was, needless to say, underwhelmed with that decision.
Well, I know many friends that fell victim to that whole thing, and I think I owned like 4 rental properties at the time. Everything crashed and it all went. Although people still needed a place to live, so they still rented it. But the value of all my houses in my portfolio went to like less than half. But eventually it did come back, and I'm about to put the last one on the market and be rid of it. So no more landlording for old Joe here.
I actually, ironically, JLD and I had bought a house in 2009 together, and we just sold it this year. So this is probably a good time to settle that up, Joe. We did well. Yeah,
it's a great time to sell and all that. But I don't want to. If you knew me real well, you'd hear me complaining about real estate a lot. But if it's done right, I mean, you certainly can make a lot of money in real estate. But if you've got other things going on, real estate kind of sucks a lot of your time and money out. So I just don't want to do very much with it anymore.
I hear that.
All right, so you're working your way through. You get dinged in the corporate financial fiasco of 2008. What's going on after that?
So at that point, I decided to lean back on some of the military recruiters that I had attempted to work with when I first got out of the Army. And I actually found a lot of traction there. And it worked out from a hiring standpoint where I found positions in middle management with the healthcare industry. And I spent time in Boston. I actually then moved down to New York City, and I was the middle manager for a Fortune 500 healthcare company. And I was rising through that corporate ladder. And again, I found myself dissatisfied with my experiences. And I was spending the majority of my time trying to work with my team of 20 sales reps, looking to fill positions, looking to recruit top talent, only to have my current top talent leave on the tail end for financial reasons, corporate culture that I had absolutely no control over. And it was as if I was a hamster running on a wheel that I just couldn't get in front of myself. People used to ask me, what's work like, Ryan? And I always used to say, I feel like I'm trying to swim up a waterfall, and that's really no fun.
Been there many times myself. So what ended up happening? I mean, what'd you do?
So I did what most people in their mid-30s who are disgruntled with their jobs do. I went and got my MBA.
Yep.
I went to Fordham University here in Manhattan. I actually live in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. So it was very convenient for me right down in the Lincoln Center campus. And while at Fordham for my MBA over the course of those 2 years, one, I made some great relationships. I was able to network and meet people that were very like-minded to myself. I actually met several other veterans who, lo and behold, were experiencing the exact same thing. So it felt good. Misery loves company. And for about a year, we decided we would just rail on our current jobs and complain. And I think therapeutically that helped, but it didn't help in the progress of your professional life. So at that point, we said, it's time we did something about this. And we talked, and our classes became strategy sessions between us. We found ourselves staying late in the evenings, going over different types of ideas. And we decided to start off by launching a podcast. And we named the podcast the Win the Talent War Podcast. And it focuses on people, strategy, corporate culture, how to retain, recruit, develop your top talent. And we interview on a weekly basis different types of business leaders out there, HR executives, C-suite individuals that have a story to tell and want to share their tactics as to how they're winning the talent war, their best practices, and then also their challenges. A lot of people are dealing with those types of issues today. And sometimes it's nice to know that you're not the only one dealing with it, but then it's also nice to know that someone else might have a really good idea that could help you and your company benefit and grow.
Now, from the Win the Talent War, you're talking about it actually from the perspective of the business or the corporation, how they can draw in and keep and maintain and train the best talent, right?
That's exactly right. So I weaned off of my own experiences as a middle manager. And what I didn't know at the time as a middle manager is that stuff is normal. And there are small things that I can control and tweak at that point. Even though it might feel like I work for a massive company, there are things that I could do to increase my employee engagement. Or even though I'm not the CEO putting out the corporate message, I can help my team understand the corporate message better by facilitating different types of communication skills to help them understand that they are part of something larger than themselves, or they are working for a greater purpose. And those types of thought processes make people more engaged and make them want to work harder for you. And as a middle manager at the time, I admittedly was not as in tune with how to do that. And I'd like to think that the Win the Talent War podcast can help middle managers, help recruiters, help HR executives understand that a little bit more and take tidbits and tactics from those episodes and implement them into their everyday.
And is the Win the Talent War podcast, is it specifically focused towards hiring military talent or just everybody in general?
So it's funny you say that. So my first few episodes that I had launched, my episode 00, I talk a lot about my past and the history that I've shared with you today, and what has transpired for me. And because of that, a lot of the feedback that I have gotten over time has been about veterans. People ask about veterans. People have asked me, do you have any ideas in regards to a veteran hiring strategy? So the intent behind the Win the Talent War podcast wasn't at first to be veteran oriented, and it's still not. It's very much broad brush stroke. It's to help everyone in the talent space understand and communicate better with their employees. But because of the veteran piece and the interest that we've gotten from a veteran standpoint, what we've now done is we've spun off an additional company called VIPO, which stands for Vetting High Potential, VHIPO. VIPO.com is where you can find more information about it, where we work with veterans like myself back in the day, trying to transition out of the military and then get into that corporate field that they are interested in that might be more applicable to their skill set.
And VIPO is specifically for veterans or focused on veterans?
VIPO is specifically focused on veterans. And how it's different from a traditional recruitment group, what I found getting out as a veteran, getting out of the military, was I had a really tough time communicating my skill set to my future employers. I had talked to you about the financial firm that I signed on with back when I first got out in Boston. Well, I was 28 years old and I was really excited about the opportunity. And I remember showing up for work in my new suit and I didn't have the fatigues on anymore. I was really, really fired up. And I was put at a cubicle, and no offense to the guys to my left or to my right, but they were two individuals 3 days out of college. Ironically, one was from Providence College, which, so we had that in common. But it was different, and there was an adjustment period there, and I couldn't relate, and there was a struggle. And I'd like to think, or I do think, that looking back, that was day one, a reason why I may have started off on the wrong foot at that current role. I didn't have those like-minded individuals. I didn't have a mentor that knew exactly what I was going through. And it placed seeds of doubt in my experience there, ultimately resulting in me leaving that firm and trying other companies. So we talk about turnover rate as employees, and this day and age, the transition period for employees is so great. It's just under 3 years, people are looking to move to their next opportunity, their next job. The time of 20, 30 years at one company are no longer. So we are working with veterans now to help them identify what companies they would want to go to, but also help them identify their own skill set and how they can best communicate that to that company, so the company is prepared to place them in something that is applicable to them.
All right. Well, hold on, Ryan. We're going to be right back and take a quick break. Have you joined the Veteran on the Move Facebook group? I personally invite every guest that I have on the podcast to join the group. So the Veteran on the Move Facebook group is a great way to connect with previous podcast guests. Our Facebook group will keep you in touch with other veterans that are transitioning to entrepreneurship, and you will also get great updates and free guides on the people, programs, and resources that will help you in your transition to entrepreneurship. All right, we're back talking with Army veteran Ryan Kellogg, who started Win the Talent War podcast and also VIPO. So, Ryan, before the break, you were talking some about VIPO. Let's back up a little bit and cover a little more detail about Win the Talent War and where are you at in that? I understand you're still working the day job, the day job, and you're running the podcast and VIPO as a couple of side hustles, right?
That is correct. I am actually currently I'm the Associate Vice President of Business Development for a healthcare company right now. Also experiencing similar challenges that a lot of our listeners, our audience on Win the Talent War are experiencing. So there's a bit of an irony there, and I work with my staff and my HR department on helping them with their hiring process and their different ideas, and open their minds a little bit in regards to how do we find talent. It's not necessarily a monster.com or an indeed.com or your traditional recruiter route, but how can we better network? How can we be brand ambassadors for our company? And instead of trying to pull talent to us, how can we draw talent so that they are coming at us? And not only for today, but potentially next year or the following year, or when they're prepared to leave school or their next opportunity, they're looking at us as something that is favorable to their next career destination.
So it sounds like your JOB, you're doing the same thing specifically for the company you're working for, but with the podcast and VIPO, you're actually able to expand those skills out all over the place in order to teach and help others how to do the same thing. Exactly.
I'm a big proponent of you've got to walk a mile in someone's shoes to really understand what they're experiencing. So, when I think about my strategy around the podcast, the avatar, so to speak, that I have tried to dial into, I really am that avatar. And I have scratched my head on how am I going to find the right individuals, the right candidates? How can I attract these candidates? But not only that, how can I retain them? How can I develop them so that they want to come to work for me every day and not become disingenuous like myself back in the day and want to leave for a different opportunity with that grass is greener mentality, only to find that it's not necessarily greener on the other side, but you are avoiding something that could have been avoided.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a great position to be in, and you're very lucky to be in that spot where your day job complements your entrepreneurial venture and vice versa, because they both kind of feed and complement each other. There's not many people that are in that position, so that's a phenomenal spot to be in.
Yeah, and it's a good feeling. The content that we're able to create and the leaders that we're able to speak to, I've been able to leverage them as speakers for my company or leverage them as consultants for my company to help us grow and improve. And that's the message that on Win the Talent War podcast that I try to give out. Each and every episode, I try to draw out a tactic that someone can implement or a service that will be of value. I'm a big fan of providing value at every stop that you can and creating value. And I try to practice what I preach.
Hey, one little sidebar note. I do want to ask, are you a member of like the New York Athletic Club, the one where the American Legion is inside the athletic club? You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. So I'm not a member of the American Athletic Club, but I am, or the New York Athletic Club rather, but I do participate in a lot of the VFW events that are there. Every time that there is a Medal of Honor recipient, they do honor them there. And I am part of their mailing list, and I make sure I attend each and every time. And there's a lot of charity events for veterans up there. There was actually one recently by a company called 9 Line Apparel. 9 Line Medevac-esque, and 2 veterans started that, and they sell some great stuff. I actually have bought several of their items, but they put on a great casino night there, and we had a blast. Yeah,
the 9 Line brief for close air support and medevac. The reason I mentioned it, fellow Marine Cobra buddy of mine, Tor, I think he might actually be the commander of the American Legion there. But anytime I'm on a layover there in New York with the airlines, if I've got a day or two, I definitely let them know I'm there. And I've been to the New York Athletic Club several times, and we've been there. Even brought my wife out to go to some of their American Legion events there, because they're about 3/4 of the way up the building. They have access to this patio, and it partially overlooks Central Park. But the reason I bring that whole thing up is the networking topic that we're discussing. There's all sorts of veteran people of very varying ages that work in the financial districts there in New York with all these different companies. Tor actually works for Bank of America. I hope that's okay I said that. And he, just going up there to see him and hang out with him, I've been exposed to all these veterans from the financial district. And I'm always curious, like, where'd you go to school and how'd you work your way into it? And it's interesting hearing all their stories, and they've all networked their way in, and all great folks. And even after they've made it, they're still coming over to the American Legion and what veteran organizations they can find there in the New York area, and trying to network with other folks in that industry. So they're still networking, even though they've made it into that industry. And I've always found it fascinating and a great example of the veteran network, and it's been really fun to be a little bit a part of that. Even though I live in Kansas City, I've had some experiences with that. So who knows, we might have even been in the same room at one point.
We may have. You're absolutely right, and you're right. There is a very strong veteran presence, particularly here in New York. It's a very densely populated area. I'm an active member of the Team Red, White, and Blue chapter here in New York. I've also done some Wounded Warrior Project events here. So I'm very fortunate to be able to tap into that resource.
Absolutely. All right. So shifting gears again, where's this entrepreneurial thing come from? Have you always been an entrepreneur?
As you ask me that, my gut reaction is no. I again grew up thinking I would have a stable job the rest of my life that led to upper echelons of success, and I'd be able to retire with the same firm. But ironically, when I think of when did I start to feel that entrepreneurial spirit, it really was in the military. My definition of an entrepreneur is someone who can create value out of nothing. And when I was a lieutenant in the Army stationed in the Diyala province, just northeast of Baghdad, right? I was actually a platoon leader in charge of 25 soldiers, but I was tasked as being the civil military liaison. And what that meant was it was our duty to go out into our sector, into our territory, and align ourselves with the influential leaders, the sheiks, the policemen, the local school, the principals of the local schools, whatever it was. And we found that a lot of that was extremely impoverished and was not in great shape, particularly the school systems. So what I did as a leader at that time, there was no playbook, there was no training for this, but I aligned myself with the local contractors, and I worked with them on different types of bids and on what I was looking for, and negotiated and drilled down different types of costs. And what it resulted in was we renovated 12 different schools. We had electrical plants done. We gave one town underground plumbing, which was, to me, a great success story, but also really taught me that if you have a vision and a plan, you can create something out of nothing that is extraordinary. And that was the beginning of it for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, that's called networking and establishing relationships. So I have to ask, were you able to put that onto a resume when you're looking for a job?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, that's one of my favorite stories. Actually, when one day we were going through a market, and through my interpreter, we approached a local business owner, and we asked him if he's ever worked with the U.S. Army, and he said back that he would have to talk to his captain, Ryan Kellogg, to discuss if he could work with me. And I took my glasses off and I said, "That's me." And he was like, "Oh my goodness!" And it made me, my ego went through the Humvee at that point. I was pretty pleased, but
it's good to be the king.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, so. We're getting close to the end of our time here. Let's give your podcast and Vipo one last shout out. How do we find it? How do we find you if somebody wants to contact you? We got any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check the podcast out. Again, it's a weekly podcast at our website at wotpod.com. That's WOTPOD.com. WarOnTalentPodcast.com. You can also check us out on iTunes. It's a weekly podcast where you're going to hear from business leaders, C-suite individuals, HR executives, entrepreneurs on anything that is people strategy, corporate culture, how to drive growth and leadership. From that, we've launched Vipo, VHIPO, Vipo.com, which if you are a veteran that's transitioning out of the military, that's looking for an opportunity, particularly here in the New York region, please check us out on our website, and we'd love to work with you. I've got a team of 6 individuals who are experienced life coaches who are chomping at the bit to help you find the correct opportunity for you based on your skill set and what your passions are post-military.
Outstanding. All right, Ryan. So as we finish up here, I do want to ask one last question. You've got a couple of great side hustles going. You would be considered a successful entrepreneur. You've gone through the process. You're making things happen. What advice would you have for that transitioning veteran that's looking to get out and go into entrepreneurship?
Joe, it would be start branding yourself now, whether it's start a blog, start a podcast, ironically, start generating interest on your LinkedIn page. You can start writing articles and posting them on LinkedIn. But social media has become such a dominant force in the networking world that the more that you can distinguish yourself from the other fellow veterans or yourself from your other employees or job candidates, the better you're going to be.
All right, Ryan, great advice. Okay, thanks for sharing your story. You're still fairly early on in your success journey, but you've landed solid. You got a great podcast going. Vipo's going strong. We look forward to hearing about your future success.
Joe, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. All right, we'll stay in touch, and maybe we'll circle back here in a year or two and have you back on, see where you're at then.
Fantastic.
All right. These two veterans are Oscar Mike. As you can tell from listening to the Veteran on the Move podcast, interviews are a great way to tell your story and spread the word about your business. If you would like to get booked as a podcast guest, I recommend Interview Valet. You can check out Interview Valet at veteranonthemove.com/valet. Be sure to check out Thrive15.com, the world's premier online education platform that helps entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and intrapreneurs learn how to start or grow a successful business. Start your free 30-day membership by going to Thrive15.com and use the promo code VETERAN. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.